All right, so you guys asked for it, and here it is. This is the story of how I managed to save $100,000 by the age of 25 while only earning minimum wage. Just quickly, before we get into the video, I just want to say a big hi and a big thank you to all of my new subscribers. As of today, I'm at about 360 subscribers here on YouTube, which I know is very tiny by YouTube standards, but it's kind of a big deal to me. I'm very new to all this, and it still just completely blows my mind that there are strangers out there who want to watch my videos, want to watch the stuff that I make, and I'm forever grateful for it, so thank you guys very much. And without any further ado, let's get into it. So just like the title says, I was able to save up $100,000 by the time I was 25, only ever earning right around minimum wage. And in order to understand how I was able to do that, I think it's important to kind of start at the beginning and have a little bit of a background of my upbringing. I've talked a little bit about it on this channel before, but I was raised broke. I was raised in a single parent home and we didn't really have much. I was never homeless, I was never without food, but money was always very tight. That's a little bit of an understatement. And as a result, I learned very early on about the value of money and about the importance of not wasting it. I think that a lot of people, when they grow up poor, the moment that they start to make their own money, their instinct is just to go crazy buying all of the things that they were never able to have when they were younger. And for me, it was quite the opposite. I don't really feel like I missed out on stuff. And if I did, I didn't really value those things enough. What I really learned was that money is important, money is scarce, and you gotta be really careful of how you use it. My mom started teaching me about the value of money when I was really young, about 4 years old. And to be totally honest with you, I don't know if this is something that she actually thought through. I don't know if she actually understood what she was doing in the moment that she did it. But a couple times a year, we would drive from Toronto to Buffalo for a little mini road trip. That was the full extent of any sort of vacation that we ever had because that was all we could really afford. And from the time that I was about 4 years old, when we'd go to Buffalo, my mom would give me $20 of spending money for the duration of the trip. And bear in mind, this was the mid-90s. So $20 could get you quite a bit of stuff, but more importantly, coming from the background that I came from, coming from the financial situation we were living in, $20 was not an insignificant amount of money. And the rules of the $20 that I was given were that I could buy basically whatever I wanted with it. However, once it was gone, it was gone. And it wouldn't matter if I was bummed out, it wouldn't matter if I whined or threw a tantrum. If I spent my money, it was gone. And if I wanted something else at that point, too bad. And so once we crossed the border, our first stop was always at Target, and I would run straight to the toy section, pick out a bunch of stupid shit, and be like, hey, this is what I want to buy, I want this stuff. And my mom would say, are you sure? And I would say, yeah. And she goes, listen, if you want that, you can buy it. It's your money, it's your choice. However, we just got here, this is the first stop, and what happens if you find something better later on, and then you've already spent your money and you can't get it? And she would make me stop, even at 4 years old, and kind of think about, well, how am I going to feel if I realize that I made a mistake? How am I going to feel if I spend this money really frivolously right now, and then I get bummed out later that I missed out on a better opportunity? And often it paid off. Often we'd wind up going to KB Toys, and I'd find a whole bag of cool things that I could get for 20 bucks that would keep me busy for the whole trip and then some. And usually I would forget all about that thing that I impulsively wanted to buy when we first arrived. And that was my first personal finance lesson. It was my first lesson, what I now know to be called delayed gratification. The idea of, are you sure you want that? Or can you hold off for the potential of something better down the road? As time went on and I got a little bit older, maybe 6, 7, 8 years old, I also started to figure out that if I didn't spend that $20 at all, I could save it, I could put it in my wallet, and the next time we came back to Buffalo a few months later, I would get another $20, and now I'd have $40, and $40 would buy me something way better than $20. And so I started to learn the idea of not only waiting to see what I really want, but waiting to see if I can actually save up money and get something even better. And so I was pretty young when I figured out that saving money was actually a game to me. It was the best because I knew that the longer I could wait, the more patient I could be, the more money I could save, the cooler thing I could ultimately buy with that money. I was 8 years old when I decided to buy myself a guitar. I found a $100 guitar in this year's wish book. I managed to save up $100. Probably took me a full year to do it, but I managed to save it. I called the number, I ordered the guitar, and I said to the customer service rep, okay, just hang on a second. I'm gonna give the phone to my mom now, and she's gonna give you her credit card number, and then I'm gonna go give her my money to pay off the credit card. And I'm pretty sure they thought that it was a prank call, but it was legit. And I got myself an acoustic guitar. It was a total piece of crap, but I was so proud of myself. So I guess you could say I've always been a saver, but let's fast forward to high school. I didn't get a job throughout all of high school. The idea to me just was completely unappealing. I saw my friends getting up at 7 o'clock in the morning to get to school. I have school from 8:30 to 3:30, and then going to work from 4 o'clock to 9:30 and working these 12, 13, 14-hour days. And to me, I was just no, thank you. But when I got to be in about grade 12, my mom was like, hey, you know what? It's time for you to get a job. You're 17, get your shit together. And so over the next couple of weeks, I started handing out resumes all over the place, and I didn't really get any callbacks. It's very hard to get a job when you don't have any job experience. Between just feeling a little defeated, handing out these resumes left, right, and center, and then seeing all of the kids I went to school with working these awful jobs, like scrubbing the ice cream machines at Dairy Queen at 9 o'clock at night, I was like, I really don't want anything to do with this. But I had an idea. By this time, I'd been playing guitar for a couple years. I was nowhere near professional, but for like a 17-year-old kid, I was okay. I wasn't terrible. And so I decided that instead of trying to find some like bullshit job at a grocery store, I would put an ad on Craigslist. And I did exactly that. I put an ad up offering private guitar lessons in my neighborhood for $30 an hour. And after a week or two, I got one hit on that ad. It was a mom somewhere in my neighborhood. She had a little boy who wanted to learn to play guitar. And after we met and she figured out that I wasn't some like creepy 50-year-old man from the internet, she hired me, and I started teaching guitar to this kid. One afternoon a week, I would walk to his house after school, teach him guitar, teach him some pop songs, some really super basic music theory, and collect my $30 and go home. And so as time went on, this woman referred me to a couple friends and a couple neighbors, and before I knew it, I had a total of 3 clients. I would work 3 hours a week playing guitar. I made $90, and I thought I hit the jackpot, because to make $90 working at a grocery store, I would have to work like an 8-hour shift. Here I was, like working 3 hours of what I found to be a very chill, very easy job, making $90 cash. I was in high school, I had no expenses, I lived at home, I didn't have a car. So to me, I was like thrilled. That was the best gig I could ever possibly hope for. And all of that money that I made, I just saved it. I had nowhere to go and nothing to do, and I didn't need to spend it on anything. I didn't have expenses, so I just saved that money. And eventually I did get a part-time job as well. Minimum wage at the time was $10.25 an hour, which is exactly what I was making. It was a part-time job at a furniture store, and I absolutely hated it. It lasted a month before I quit. It was total bullshit. But again, I made, a few $100s that month, and I saved that. I then got another retail job that was also $10.25 an hour, and it was also bullshit, and I lasted also a month, and I quit, but again, I saved that money, and I just went back to teaching guitar. Fast forward to me graduating high school. At this point, I've been teaching guitar for the better part of a year. I'd had these brief stints at these retail jobs that I had quit, but between that kind of thing and a little bit of, extra money here and there, I'd saved up about $4,000, and I was pretty pleased with that. Keep in mind, I was like 17 years old, so $4,000 was a considerable amount of money to me. I had no intentions of going to university, and as a result, my mom was like, listen, if you're not going to school, you're surely not sitting around at home on your ass all day, so you better go and get yourself a job before September, or you're gonna have to start paying rent here, like for real rent. And I was like, oh, I can't afford for real rent, so I found myself a job. I got a job at a music store doing what I call desk monkey work, where I was basically like booking lessons for like kids coming in to take their guitar lessons or drum lessons. And I was paid $11 an hour. And I thought that was kind of a big deal because minimum wage was $10.25. Here I was getting 75 cents an hour more. Also, though, it wasn't full-time. It was like 25 to 30 hours a week. So it averaged out to still probably a little bit less than a full-time minimum wage job. The job itself was pretty chill. It was pretty easy. The management was awful, but there's always a catch. And I stayed at that job for a year. In and amongst that time, I actually wound up buying a car for myself because I lived a considerable distance from the store. So I bought a $4,000 car, and therefore I had all the expenses associated with it. I had gas and maintenance and insurance. I was paying a few $100s a month at home, not like anywhere near what rent would actually cost, but I was contributing a little bit towards the bills, as well as we had an old sick dog at home, and so I took over his medical bills. So I was paying a few $100s a month at home, plus my car expenses, and other than that, I was basically saving absolutely everything that I made. So I worked at that music store for a year, and by the time that I quit, I was 19 years old, and I had about $20,000 saved. At this point, it really became like a game to me. It was like, I didn't want to buy things. I didn't want to spend my money. I just enjoyed watching that number climb every single day. When I would get a paycheck, I would check my account and be like, oh, I got $400 more. And I was just really, really happy to watch that number grow. It excited me. And so 19 years old, $20,000, and I quit that job. But something that I always made a habit of doing was that if I was going to quit a job, at that point, at least going forward, if I was going to quit a job, I wanted to make sure I had something else lined up. And I did. When I quit the music store, I had another retail job lined up that was closer to home, and the wage was about the same. I was making maybe $11.25. I don't exactly remember, but it wasn't much. And I was working, 25 hours a week at this point, but that was fine. It was a better job, I think, overall. And after about a year, I managed to work myself up to a full-time position at that store, which offered me a phenomenal raise of $0.00. However, it did come along with a bit of a sales gig, and so there's a small commission associated with that. So factoring my commissions in, it averaged out my wage to about $13 an hour. And at that point, that was by far the most money I'd ever made in my life. $13 an hour, especially when minimum wage was $10.25. Felt like a lot, but honestly, it's not. But I was working a 37.5 hour on the clock week at $13-ish an hour. And I stayed at that place for about 4 years. It was an okay job, you know, I didn't mind doing it. But by the time that I finally left, I was so beyond burnt out. However, by that time, also worth noting is that I was 23 years old. And again, saving up all the money that I was making, I was still living at home. I still drove that same piece of shit car. And I had managed to save up about $80,000 by then. Now I know that $80,000 sounds like an awful lot of money, and for me it surely was, but bearing in mind that I started that job with $20,000 in my account already, that means that I was able to save about 15 grand per year while I was working there, and at the end of the 4 years I had a total of $80,000. But by that time I was super tired and super burnt out and just not doing very well. And so I decided to quit that job in lieu of a change, to do something a little bit different. And I spent about 6 months working various shitty jobs that were each paying me about $11 an hour. So it was actually a step down in my pay, but I just wanted something different, thinking it would be better, but it wasn't. I spent 1 month at one job, 3 months at another job, and then another 3 months at the final job that I ever had, which I actually made a video about and I'll link to it up here. It was by far the worst job I ever had, and it was the first time and only time in my life that I'd actually been fired. Because I wasn't necessarily expecting that to happen, I didn't have anything else lined up, and for the first time in my life since I had left high school, by this point I was 23, almost 24 years old, and I decided that instead of setting myself up for failure and looking for another shitty job that was going to pay me another shitty wage, I would start my own business. And as anybody who's ever started a business can tell you, it's not that simple, and it takes a long time to build up a reputation and to build up a client base. And thankfully, again, because I was living at home, you know, and I realized that not everybody can stay living at home in their mid-20s. Not everybody has the chance, not everybody wants to. I can't say I really wanted to either, but I didn't have many other options available to me in that moment. And so I was 23 and I was like, all right, hey, you know what? I'm gonna try starting my own business, see if I can make something out of this. And it took a while, we'll say that much. But in that same time, I also picked up a side hustle, and actually I made a video about that as well, which I'll link to up here, I'm not really sure which side that goes on. My side hustle was flipping. So I'd go online, I'd go to Craigslist, Kijiji, Facebook Marketplace, whatever. I'd buy things and I would fling them for a profit. And there was a point where I was actually making more money doing my flipping than running my actual business. But I did that from age 23 onwards, and by the time that I was 25, just 2 short years later, I had managed to save another $15,000 per year, which brought me up to a grand total of $110,000 sitting in my savings account by age 25. And it was around this time that my old car that I had been driving all along had decided to die, and I needed a new one. I decided I wanted to spend a little bit more money this time, get a little bit of a nicer car, but I didn't want to overdo it, and I was certainly not willing to go into debt for it. So I decided that I would allocate $10,000 of my savings towards buying a new car, and that if I decided to spend any amount more than that, I was going to have to find another way to make up that money. So I actually decided to buy a car that was about $15,000. I took $10,000 out of my savings, leaving me with $100,000 still in the bank. And I decided to make up that extra $5,000 by just selling some things at home that I wasn't using. It took me a couple months, but I did it. And I remember going into the dealership saying, hey, okay, this is the kind of car that I want a pre-owned. This is the amount of money I'm willing to spend. And the salesman, who I've actually known for a while at Toyota, a really nice guy, said to me, well, hey, you know what? For just a little bit more money, I can get you in a new car. And I said, yeah, no, I'm not looking for a new car, and I'm not willing to spend a little bit more money. And he goes, well, you know, you work, don't you? And I went, yeah, I guess you could say that. And he goes, well, I could set you up with financing, you know, for $25,000, I could get you into a brand new, whatever their car of the moment was. And I was like, buddy, I don't need your financing to buy a $25,000 car. I have no use for a $25,000 car, and I'm not willing to spend $25,000 on a car, especially not at a 7% interest rate. But in general, I don't need a $25,000 car. And I think that's an important lesson to take away, is I think that a lot of people in my situation would have been like, fuck yeah, new car, you know, financing, I don't have to pay for it out of pocket. And it's so easy to get yourself in over your head and commit yourself into things that don't serve you, that you don't need. And so there I was at 25 years old with $100,000 in my bank account and a pre-owned Toyota RAV4 on my driveway that I had paid for in cash. And I sat there with this money thinking, okay, you know what? I think I'm ready. I think I want to buy a home. And as luck would have it, and really I can't attest this to anything other than luck, at this time my business also started to pick up and got to the point where I was actually able to earn a real income and support myself. I don't make a phenomenal amount of money, but I am able to pay my bills. And I used that $100,000 as a down payment for this, for the house that I bought, for my home. And so that just goes to show you that you don't have to have a super high income to be able to save money, but you do have to have self-control, the ability to delay gratification, and goals that you can work towards, that you're motivated and focused on. If I had been making good money that whole time, I probably would have had $300,000 saved up. So maybe I only sabotaged myself by pissing around for, 7 years or 8 years after high school. But I managed to do the thing, I got the job done. And there's a couple things that I want you to take away from this as far as what really went on behind the scenes in my head that led me to being able to do what I did. The first, and in my opinion, the most important thing that I did was I tracked my income and I tracked my spending. I use an app on my iPhone called Spend. I'll link to it in the description. This is not sponsored, it's a free app. And it just allows you to input money when you get paid, whether it's by a paycheck or a client, whatever it is. You input how much money you have coming in. And then every single time that I spend money, I still do this today, by the way. Every single time I spend money, whether it's $1 for a drink or it's $100 for groceries, whatever it is, I input it on the app. And that way, at the end of the month, I can see how much money I spent in every category, where every single dollar I've earned has gone, and how much money I have left over, if at all. An undeniable part of this whole story that allowed me to get to where I was the fact that I was living at home. And like I mentioned, I wasn't living completely rent-free. I was contributing to some bills, but definitely I was paying much, much less, probably 25% of what I would have been paying if I had rented my own apartment. Rent in this part of the world is super expensive. And so if you have the ability to stay at home, if you have that opportunity, if it's something you can deal with, I would definitely recommend doing it, even if you have to help out a little bit with your folks. If that's not an option for you, if that's not something that's available, I would recommend finding the cheapest living arrangements that you possibly can, whether that means house hacking or having some roommates. When you're in your late teens, in your early and mid 20s, that is the time to do it. You don't want to be living like that forever, but if you can kind of deal with it on the short term, and to me, living with my mom was, equally as bad as living with a roommate, maybe arguably worse. But if you can put up with it for the short term, again, if you can delay that gratification, you will have the opportunity to have things that you otherwise wouldn't. So find the cheapest living arrangements possible, because housing is the #1 expense for almost everybody. Something else that's really, really important is to stay out of debt. Owning this home, having a mortgage on this home, is the first debt I have ever been in my entire life. I've never had credit card debt. I never had a car loan. I never had a personal loan. A mortgage is the first and only debt I've ever had, and hopefully the only debt I will ever have. It's so easy to look at something that you can't afford and justify putting on your credit card and paying it off month to month. But if you don't have the cash for it, you don't have the cash for it. Don't put it on your credit card. If you can't afford to pay for something outright right now, paying 20% annual interest is not going to make your life any better. Something else that I did is what I call a reverse budget, which when you think of what a budget means, it's typically like allocating certain amounts of money to every category, this much for rent, this much for food, this much for, gas, whatever. I pay myself first. So I take the first chunk off the top and I put it in my savings immediately. And then what's left over is what I have to spend on groceries and gas and everything else. The thing that was probably the biggest driver in this for me, which, made it worth my while to stay at home, even though I wasn't happy there, and made it worth my while to save money, even when it was tempting not to, was just to set my goals and stay focused. I knew what I wanted, and as tough as it was sometimes to stay the course, I knew that that was the only way I was going to get what I wanted, and so I just stayed laser focused. Just set your goals and stay as focused as possible. Tunnel vision. Tunnel vision is what you need, because it makes it so easy to say no to everything else when you know what you want and you know that you're getting yourself closer to it. Something else that I recommend everybody does is to find a side hustle. And it totally sucks that we're living in this time when having a job, even if it's a decent paying job, is not enough. Housing is so expensive, transportation is so expensive, food is so expensive. A lot of us just need a secondary income of some sort, even if it's just a little boost at the end of the month. So if you can find a side hustle, whether that is a second part-time job, whether that's flipping things online, check the link up there to understand how to do that. Maybe it's tutoring kids over Zoom. Do whatever you can do. Everybody has a skill, and something that I think is really interesting to think about is that in order for you to teach something to someone, you only have to be this much better than they are. So if you want to teach guitar to kids, you don't have to be a pro guitar player. You just have to be like a little bit better than the person you're teaching. If you want to teach math to somebody, you don't have to be a professor, but if you have an 8th grade math education, you can teach 4th grade math to somebody. You just have to be a little bit better. You don't have to be an expert. Something else that I have been religious about basically my entire life is making food and coffee and all that kind of stuff at home. I very, very rarely go out to eat. The amount of money you'll save just by making your food and coffee at home, just staying disciplined about that. I know how easy it is to just become tired and become lax and become lazy. But honestly, every time you fall off the wagon with one of these habits, the only one you're sabotaging is yourself. And don't cave to peer pressure. That's such a high school mentality. It's such an immature thing for your friends to try to convince you to, come out for drinks or go out to a restaurant that's way out of your budget. And I'm not saying you can't treat yourself to things from time to time, but know where your limits are, know what your comfort zone is, and don't let anybody force you out of it, because ultimately they don't have to pay your bills. They don't have to live in the apartment that you live in. They don't have to drive the broken down piece of shit car that you drive. You're the one who has to make the choices to set yourself up, and so don't let other people, push you and bully you into doing things you don't want to do, even if it's coming from a good place. If your friends are going out to the bar tonight and you want to join them, but you know that you're completely tapped financially, go to the bar, shoot some pool, play some pinball, drink a Coca-Cola. You don't have to ring up a massive bar tab just to go out and be with your friends. I've had so many friends get frustrated with me over the years because I would go out to a bar with them and never, ever, ever get drunk. I hate getting drunk. I hate drinking, to be honest with you. So at the very most, I'd have like one drink, which I would nurse the entire night. They'd always go, oh, why doesn't Nicole ever get drunk? Well, Nicole doesn't get drunk because A, she hates throwing up. B, it's a giant waste of money. And C, she's trying to buy a freaking house. So I'm happy with the choices I made, and you have to be happy with the choices you make. If you enjoyed this video and you found it helpful, please go ahead and hit the like button. I'm pretty new here on YouTube, and every like I get helps me out tremendously. Please also subscribe if you haven't done so. Drop me a comment down below. Let me know what your savings goals are. Let me know what you're working towards. You're trying to get out of debt? You're trying to buy a house? Are you trying to find a nicer apartment? Tell me what your goals are and tell me what you're working towards. Other than that, thank you guys so much for watching as always, and I will see you in the next video.